So let's talk about hard drives. We have an ST506, Enhanced Small Device Interface, ESDI, this is really old. Integrated Device Electronics, Enhanced Integrated Drive Electronics, so IDE and EIDE, again, really old. And Small Computer Systems Interface. Today, everything's SATA, right? Serial Attached SCSI. Or SATA Serial Attached ATA drives. Let's see, they don't even mention it here. So installation and setup, the 5 steps. Physical installation and cabling. You have to enable it in the BIOS. The older computers, again, this is old. I'm sorry you haven't to learn this stuff, but it's on the test, so you have to know it. So the older hard drives, you actually had to go in and enable them in the BIOS to get them to show up when you booted the system for the OS. We have a low-level formatting, we have a partitioning, and then a high-level formatting. So these are things that had to happen from the BIOS, and then from the system, and then the high-level formatting for the actual computer to use it and address it. So what does the physical installation and cabling look like? So the interface data cable, today we use a SATA, which is a really small cable, and then we have the power cable. So today the power cable in this case, some of you may have seen this Molex power cable in addition to our little SATA cable, and you know that the power connection is even bigger. Today they kind of come as one cable, or you might have a separate power and a separate SATA cable, and they're really small, but this is what the older ones look like. And again, they had pins and it had to go in the right way, but they're keyed. There's one missing pin, and it had a block, so if you try to put it on the wrong way, it won't go unless you force it, and then you bend the pins, and now you got a dead disk or a big problem. So setting the CMOS for the hard disk drive. So we get into the CMOS. Remember, we press delete or whatever. So you see the floppy disk A, which is the diskette A, and then we have the IDE adapter. And even years ago even, you could still set it to auto and it would just go and fill it in for you. So you see that the C drive is 1065 or 55 megabytes here. So it'd go in and just configure it on its own, master slave. And before we used to have to set all that. Which adapter are you on? Am I master slave? You had to set a little jumper on the drive to say master slave. It was a real pain. But it used to take a lot of knowledge to build a computer, but today just about anybody can put one together. Setting the system CMOS for the hard drive setup screen. So in here, nowadays you just go auto, or not nowadays, you just plug them in. You don't even need to do auto. But even years ago, you had to go in here and tell it to hit enter to get it to go and figure out what was in there. So this one's trying to auto configure here. You don't have to manually set it. So back in the day, you see the connector between the black one and the big pin connector. There's a little tiny one. That's where the jumpers would go on. You see those pins that sit out there? You would insert that jumper to short those pins if it was master or slave, and it would tell you on the disk which ones were, which pin represented what. So it's kind of a pain to figure out. So low-level formatting creates and organizes sectors. So what's a sector again? A sector is that little outer edge between a sector and a track, right? A sector between, if you cross a sector with a track, no, if you cross a sector with a track, you get a cluster, right? So you get the little sectors are the geometry inside of the track, right? So that's what we're talking about here. Low-level formatting creates and organizes the sectors, those little chips around the disk, and sets the proper interleave, how wide that area needs to be to make it the most usable, right? It kind of figures it out. And establishes the boot sector, where are we going to write the boot information. Preparing the new hard drive, you had to create a bootable disk with formatting utilities. We create a Microsoft Windows 98 startup disk. We used a bootable disk to partition and format the drive. Some of this is still relevant today, but not much. We still need to partition it. So you have a partitioning agent, and this is what it looked like. And then we have a high-level formatting. Format.com does the following: creates and configures the FAT, the file allocation tables. So the FAT this is specifically for Windows, okay? The FAT tracks which parts of a file is stored on which sector. So it's kind of keeping a map of what's stored where. The FAT32 uses disk space more efficiently than its predecessor, not anywhere near like today. This is not relevant today. And then we have high-level formatting. Consider several factors before using FAT32. So they had FAT, FAT16, and FAT32. You should not use FAT32 on a dual boot system shared by operating systems that do not support FAT32. So everything had to play nicely. This was a time when we had to go out and buy separate software to manage the partition, like Partition Magic and things like that. You don't need them today. I think they still sell it for different things, but you don't really need it today. The OSs play nicely together now. They've kind of figured all this out. And then FAT32 partitions are shared that can be read across the network. FAT32 does not support compression. So you couldn't go back and put the disk on there. Today we don't need compression. The disks are massive that we use today. But there was a time when they weren't that big and we needed more space than we could usually afford. So we had to compress the data on the disk to get more out of it. And man, it was a mess. It created a lot of problems when they would crash. So FAT32 does not support compression. You should not use disk utilities that are not made for FAT32. So we had a lot of tools and stuff, and if you go and ran these tools that were for FAT, on FAT32 you could corrupt the disk and it would no longer be recoverable.